Hello and welcome, foolish mortals. Today's discussion is a little interesting because it's based on one of Disney's more obscure, scary-ish films.
Hollywood Pictures and Amblin Entertainment present Arachnophobia. 8 legs, 2 fangs, and an attitude.
Perk up, Lloyd. If we find the spider that did this, you can arrest him.
No, it's actually not considered a horror film, but instead a thrill-omedy.
Arachnophobia, a thrill-omedy.
So, if you're not a fan of spiders, you know this video is not for you, but you would have seen the title and known not to click on it.
See, back when I was going through picking out the films I wanted to review for the 365 Days of Disney films I did years ago, I knew when I got to October, there were too many horror-adjacent films to choose from, which of course is a wonderful thing for me, but I had to admit a lot of interesting films to talk about. So this was one of the films that didn't make the cut. I did go back and watch the film though to make sure I was familiar going into the gameplay, although I can tell you now that it's not needed to play said game. However, it was still a good watch.
I love throwing the spotlight on all the forgotten and obscure Disney projects of the past. Now, remember kids, right before the Disney Renaissance happened, Disney was trying to throw everything at the wall metaphorically to see what would be successful. At the same time, they knew they couldn't be only a children's media company and wanted to expand onto more adult-oriented subjects.
I've talked about this before with a lot of the films they did between the 1980s and 90s. The film industry as a whole was starting to get a lot more edgier and adult with their choices, and Disney, not wanting to tarnish their Disney brand, came out with a couple different film studios under their domain. Touchstone Pictures, which is the more well-known separate studio, and Hollywood Pictures, in which Arachnophobia was the first film made under the studio with the help of Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's company.
So, of course, computer and video games were on the rise around this time, and it was very common for a video game to be a tie-in with the film presented, a tradition that continued to get a lot bigger by the turn of the millennium. And so that's how we got one of the darkest video games Disney has produced. Don't believe me? There's a proof right there. I love seeing that attached to a creepy spider game.
Back in 1991, Arachnophobia was released on MS-DOS, Amiga, Amstread CPC, and Commodore 64. All systems that are completely obsolete now, but thanks to the wonderful Internet Archive programs, games are still playable. Besides Disney Software, it wasn't called Disney Interactive here, it was also developed by Blue Sky Software. After a few still screens explaining the brief synopsis of the story, it's time to play. The gameplay is simple. This is when most games are still limited in both graphics and memory size. You play as John Goodman's character Delbert as you go through the various houses killing spiders. There's multiple rooms and multiple floors in each of the houses, and the spiders vary in where they're all located. Some are scattered across the floor and some are jumping spiders. You're able to aim the bug spray in 3 different directions: down at the floor, straight ahead in front of you, or pointing up to attack the spiders that are jumping. This did take me a while to figure out that this was an option, and the first couple times while I was playing, I only thought you could shoot in the general forward direction. There's also 2 bombs that you can drop to kill all the spiders in the room, but once you drop it, that's it. I didn't get far enough into the game to see if you stumble upon more along the way, but I did get far enough to see that the first aid is available every so often. If you end up getting bit by the spiders, your health does go down, but it's not instantly game over. You have to get bit about 4 or 5 times before you die, but again, if you collect the first aid kit, that restores your health to keep going.
And that's the game!
You go through the houses and continue to keep killing spiders until you get to the end. It's a strategic platform shooting game, but I can see how kids that like this game could play for hours just getting better with their skills. Also, remember that in the early 90s, this was a normal type of gameplay most video games presented. A few years later, PC games started to get a lot more advanced with the addition of flash animation, but in 1991, this was high quality.
Also, this game over screen might be the most metal and horror piece of artwork Disney has been a part of. Imagine playing this late at night in the 90s, and this pops up on the screen. I'm sure it terrified many kids back in the day. Even though this film was well received, I feel like it's almost forgotten now. There's tons of unfond memories from people online that do remember it, sharing that they'll never forget how they felt watching it as an adolescent. But more recently, it's been locked away in the non-existent Disney Vault. Currently, it's not available at all to stream, it's not on Disney Plus, and the only way I was able to watch it was to rent the film from Amazon Prime. If anything, the remnant of it left behind is subtle. My best connection that I have with this film was the score, as it's part of the loop that runs through the Land Pavilion at Epcot. For such a terrifying film, the score is honestly beautiful, and one of the best pieces of music I've heard. One can only hope that it does come to Disney Plus, but with their track record, I'm sure it's not going to come anytime soon. But I do believe that this should be added to our spooky films that we traditionally watch around this time of year. And even though the game doesn't have too much substance to it, it still is a game that you can play for a long time, especially if you want to keep on getting a better score and getting further throughout the houses. Like I mentioned previously, thankfully, thanks to the Internet Archive programs, it is available online to play for free. That's how I was able to access it. So I'll leave a link in the description if you are curious about playing. But otherwise, I'm grateful for all the people that are making sure that it doesn't remain obsolete forever and it's not fading away into full total obscurity. But until then, you might want to check your slippers, your lampshades, and popcorn bowls to make sure there's not any unwanted guests around. And as always, I hope you have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.